Hey, what's up, paintballers? This is video number 6 out of 30 in my 30 video and 30 day challenge to myself, but it's also the next video in our series talking about the 7 basic human movements. So all of the basic movements that make us human, and because our bodies are use it or lose it, they're the 7 movements we all need to be doing on a weekly basis as much as possible to make sure that we are stimulating those muscles, keeping those movements, keeping the range of motion we have at all of the joints involved, and basically making sure that we stay as active and hopefully as athletic humans as we can, because paintball, it's definitely requires some athleticism. So it's one of those sports similar to golf that you can do it, at pretty much any ability level, but the more athletic you are, the better you're going to do at it. So let's try to keep you as athletic as possible. Today we're going to be talking about GAIT. So far we've gone over the squat, the hinge, the push, and the pull. We still have left to talk about GAIT, trunk rotation, and the loaded carry. I'm going to talk about GAIT, and as I mentioned in the very first video, I kind of lumped together several things that other people might consider separate basic movements, but to me, I think they're close enough in pattern to each other that they're all essentially the same movement. And by that, I also mean that if you're doing one, you don't need to be doing the others necessarily, although we'll kind of dive into the nuances of that here in a few minutes. So basically the 3 movements that I consider all to be of the same category are running / jogging, sprinting, and then lunging. And those might sound very different, but literally if you look at your lunge stance, like let's start in a sprint stance. Like if you want to try this yourself, get down on the floor, get in the position that you think you would start a sprint from. You can even pretend that you've got the gun behind you pointed at the start box. Get into that position. Now keep your feet exactly where they are and stand up. Your back knee might be a little higher off the ground, but drop a little bit. You're literally in a lunge. So that's why, in my opinion, sprinting and running are both obviously very similar. They're just kind of how long can you sustain it? You change the pattern, the tempo a little bit so that you can either run for longer distance slower or shorter distances faster. So I think most people can agree that, yeah, those are similar, just kind of 2 different ends of the running spectrum. But yeah, if you look at the lunge and the sprint, they're actually really similar to each other. So that's why, in my opinion, they may as well all fall into the same category. So let's talk about each one, and particularly how you can adapt that movement to paintball. Now I'm going to start off with the sprint, because out of any of these movements, the sprint is going to be the most applicable to paintball, because especially at the tournament level, we're really doing short, fast bursts of running. We're not running long distances at a slow, consistent speed. Like paintball is all about moving quickly, and therefore a sprint is going to be much better to train compared to running 2 miles, 3 miles, much less a marathon. So in my opinion, if you're going to do any of these movement patterns, I would do the sprint and make that a part of your weekly workout routine. I've been doing it myself, and for the first time in my life, honestly, I've enjoyed sprinting. Normally our bodies kind of like hate high stress situations, which is why a lot of people don't like to exercise, is because you're literally stressing the body. But when you start to feel those benefits after just 1 or 2 workouts, and you come back and you do, for example, your sprint a 3rd or 4th time, you start feeling that difference and you realize, wow, this is actually really addicting. Like I don't necessarily enjoy the duress that I'm under after doing a set of 10 sprints, but I do really like the way I feel after I've accomplished it, the feeling of accomplishment that you get, and then a few days later when you come back and you do it again and you realize, wow, I'm faster and I'm not nearly as winded. So try to make that a part of your routine. Let's talk about running long distances. This is definitely the starting point for most people. Granted, some people who have injuries might need to start with a lunge to where they build up this range of motion, this movement pattern, but everyone for their entire lives until you're using a walker or you're in a wheelchair, which doing these movement patterns will prevent you from getting there, barring any catastrophic injury. But everyone should be doing, every human on the face of the earth should be doing some form of running, not just because it's a basic human movement, but because it is so beneficial for your health. out of any of the 4 dimensions of exercise, which is neuromuscular, cardiorespiratory, resistance, and neuromotor. Cardiovascular exercise is the single most beneficial to your health. I think I said one of the dimensions of fitness twice by accident. So it's flexibility, neuromotor, resistance, and cardiovascular. So sorry if I said neuromotor twice there. Again, these videos are not scripted, so I'm trying to catch myself if I accidentally say something wrong. Sometimes my brain gets a little bit ahead of my mouth. Sometimes my brain gets ahead of my mouth. I should say often. I can also hear my family right outside the door, like walking past the door. So I'm like, are they about to bust in here and tell me something? Or I'm trying not to get distracted. So anyway, everyone needs to be doing a run at minimum, but paintballers should be doing sprints at minimum, and preferably sprinting and lunging. But I would also say if you can add it in, long distance running is definitely good. I include a lot of long distance running in my level 1 training program at playbetterpaintball.com because that program is for people who are deconditioned. They're not going to be ready for sprints. They're not going to be ready for hardcore lunges. Running is a good way to just start getting your body used to picking up the intensity from a walk to something more intense. So we have a combination of movements, including a lunge, including slow speed and intermittent running, so that we can start getting your body ready to do higher and higher intensity things that come in the level 2 and level 3 programs. But for the sake of making sure that your lungs, your heart, your whole cardiovascular system are stimulated, healthy, and improving week to week, long distance running is definitely the best thing you can do for your health. And as far as general population goes, it's the safest out of any intensity of running to make sure that you are stimulating those systems and keeping those ranges of motions, those muscles all conditioned. While we're on the subject, for those who are like, I cannot run right now, my ankles, my knees, my hips, my back, whatever, just can't take it. If it's only your lungs holding your back, push it. Like, try to get to the point where you're out of breath, rest, and then go again till you're out of breath, rest. It doesn't matter if it's 10 seconds, 10 minutes, whatever it is. If it's only your lungs holding your back, that's okay. Stress it to the point of when you need to stop and rest, recover, and then go again. You might be able to only go for like 9, 8, 7 seconds, minutes, whatever it was the first time. It'll be less and less most likely as you go. That's okay. Just keep pushing your endurance. But for the other people whose joints or body are holding them back, a way to bridge walking to slow, steady running would be to simply add an incline to the treadmill and start walking against gravity a little bit more. That alone is going to be a step up from walking, but not quite running, obviously. And then another thing you can do if you can handle running for just a few seconds at a time. I literally worked with a lady 2 years ago, and this is what we did was, hey, how long can you sustain a run? And it was only like 30 seconds. I was like, that's totally fine. Let's do 5 sets of 30 seconds with a 2-minute break in between each one. Can you do that? Yeah, that feels safe. Let's do it. Next thing you know, less than 2 or 3 months later, she was running for, it was like 5-10 minutes at a time. So more than doubling, exponentially running farther in just a matter of weeks. So long distance running, obviously important for everybody, particularly for health. Sprinting, better for paintballers who are healthy enough to do sprints. But let's talk about the lunge and how it can basically assist with both and how it really should be part of your routine if you have the time. Granted, I'm a dad, I get it. Not everyone has time to do everything every week. But if you did in theory, the lunge is going to be really good at making sure that we're not just conditioning the GAIT movement pattern, but we're also strengthening it. The stronger you get, whatever range of motion you're in, the less energy you're going to expend in that range of motion, the more injury resistant you're going to be. So you're basically building resilience in your running and your sprinting when you are loading a lunge. Granted, you can always start out with a body weight lunge, decrease the range of motion for anyone who struggles to do a full range of motion lunge, feels really fragile when they do it. Decrease the range of motion, don't add any weight at the beginning, but as you realize, okay, I can do 10, I can do 20 even, start adding a load. That's really the point of the lunge, is to really strengthen our body in that movement pattern. We're not really supposed to load our body while we're running, while we're sprinting. It's just not really safe. It's not really what we're trying to do in those situations. So the safest part, or the safest way to load the GAIT movement pattern, is to do it in the form of a lunge. So big range of motion, down as far as you can, knees at 90 degrees, trunk can be leaned forward if you want to incorporate the hips more, or it can be straight up, perpendicular to the ground if you want to hit your quads more. Neither is necessarily right or wrong, but you get the idea that loading the lunge is going to strengthen and increase your injury resistance in the sprinting and running movement patterns. Now, how can we adapt these things to paintball? I don't think it makes any sense to try to adapt the run to paintball, since we just don't really do long distance, slow running. Like I said, it's a fast burst. So let's focus on sprinting and lunging, and I'll start with the lunge. Since we need to stay low in paintball, and we're usually sprinting, so we want to mimic our sprint with our lunge as much as possible, I think it makes sense to lean forward more when you're lunging, as well as, just take a really long stride. So maybe not necessarily 90-90 at the knee on each end of your lunge, but a little bit more acute angle in the front and a little more obtuse angle in the back. So really just stretching, like striding as far as possible. That sharper angle on the front knee, the acute angle, is going to hit your quad more, but by leaning the trunk forward more, you're also going to be hitting the hip more. So by sharpening any of those angles, closing those angles more, you're going to be working those joints more. So a lunge in this fashion is going to be harder than a standard lunge with the knees at 90 on each end and your trunk perfectly perpendicular to the ground. So trying to do endurance, so not necessarily super heavy, but definitely increasing weight week to week as you get stronger, but probably focusing on the ability to do 10 to 20 lunges at a time, not really worrying about going so heavy that I can only do a few at a time. It makes more sense to keep it kind of in that mid-range, like basically the distance from one bunker to another. It's never going to be more than 10 or 20 lunges apart. So somewhere in that 10 to 20 rep range at a time, going as heavy as you can while still making that rep range, and then making a long distance stride. Again, when you're able to. For those who aren't there yet, start with a standard lunge with shortened range of motion, no weight, increase the range of motion as you can, and increase the weight as you can. If you want someone to take all the guesswork out, playbetterpaintball.com. Okay, let's talk about sprinting. So there is going to be something that you can mimic in the gym, and then there's some things that you just simply cannot. So here's one of those few instances where working on your fitness at the paintball field rather than the gym actually makes more sense. Because we're never really running straight to something in paintball, and we're also usually sliding or diving at the end of it, it makes a lot of sense to do some curved routes at the paintball field when we're sprinting. Very few gyms are going to give you an opportunity to sprint in a curved fashion, whether you're rounding a bunker and going to the next one, or maybe even doing an S route, something like that. Very few gyms have the space to allow you to safely do that without running into someone else, much less have a turf in there to mimic running on grass and allowing you to wear your cleats. So it does make sense to me to try to get out to a paintball field, but if you can't do a paintball field, some open field at a park, and do some sprint drills where you're running with a curve in your route. So starting this direction and curving back this way, maybe even finishing it with a slide or a dive, just to work on those as well. But it's very different sprinting when your body is leaning one way trying to make a turn than it is just sprinting straight like you would on a treadmill or on your gym's narrow turf that it might have. So trying to stress your body regularly to those asymmetrical curved movement patterns or sprint patterns, it makes a lot of sense to do that outside of the gym. Now, as far as what you can do in the gym, and you should be able to do a sprint, even if it is on a treadmill, to simply max out your top speed, get your body used to pumping the arms, the limbs that fast, as well as conditioning the lungs, the heart, everything to be able to pump that amount of blood, absorb that amount of oxygen, deliver it across the body. You know, the conditioning for the sprint itself is something you absolutely can, and honestly are probably safer doing in a gym setting because it's air conditioned. And depending on where you live, there's only a few months out of the year that you can really safely max out that top sprint speed outside. So having the ability to do that in an air conditioned setting really just maximizes safety. So I definitely recommend trying to focus on your top speed, your endurance sprinting in the gym setting where it's air conditioned. And when it's convenient or possible, try to incorporate some sprint drills mixed in with your other practices where you're, again, trying to max out your speed, but with those curved, non-linear sprint paths. You get it. You get what I'm saying. I think that's enough time talking about the GAIT, so I'm going to close it there. Again, I have more than 20 videos left that I have to make before I finish this challenge to myself, so if I didn't cover something or something was confusing, put it in the comments below, and I promise I will make a video responding to it and giving you more detail. Hope that was educational. Hope all these videos have been helpful to you. Again, if you want someone to take the guesswork out of your fitness and target it towards paintball, check out playbetterpaintball.com. And thanks as always for the engagement, the support, the subscriptions. It means a lot and it does help. So thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.